Greg Andrick here, bringing you another Business Freedom Conversation post. So it's August and Congress adjourns and the Biden administration drops the regulations. So here we have a whole nother batch of massive regulations. I had the little surfer riding the tidal wave in Portugal because is your business like that surfer? Are you going to hang on or are you going to fall off? It's a massive amount of rules they've released. Some of these rules are as much as 700 pages long. I have a Wall Street Journal video after this to take a look at what's going on. It's a confrontational executive branch that is going to force Congress to sue and go to the Supreme Court because they're usurping the power of Congress again. These rules are so broad. The biggest one is that all new cars have to be electric by 2032. That's 3 years before California mandated it. How are we going to boost the electric grid in 9 years to handle everybody charging their car rather than pumping gas? The other big one is that large projects are going to have to consider social justice in granting the permit. So take a look at here what's going on. As a business owner, this is really concerning to you because all of these rules generally hem you in, make things more expensive, stretch things out, make it more difficult to have ends meet. I bring this to you so that you can see it, so that you can try to figure out how to ride that tidal wave. There's ways to do this. There's ways to organize it no matter how tough the government gets on you. There's ways to plan. So enjoy, take a look at the video from the Wall Street Journal. Know that there's a lot coming down the pipe and it's aimed at you, the small business owner. Thanks. This is Greg Andrick. I'll catch you on the next one for the Business Freedom Conversation.
With Congress leaving town for summer recess, the Biden administration is taking the opportunity to roll out dozens of new regulations that will cost Americans hundreds of billions of dollars. We begin with the Transportation Department, which just proposed a 696-page rule that would raise fuel economy standards for passenger cars and light trucks in a move that would effectively require 100% of new cars to be electric by 2032. Let's bring back Dan Henninger, Kim Strassel, and Kate Batchelder Odell. So, Kate, why don't you take up this new big rule on auto standards, mileage standards, because this is a major impact economically.
Right, it is, Paul. I mean, to your point, it's basically requiring effectively 100% of new vehicles to be electric by the early 2030s. As we wrote earlier this week, that is more ambitious than even California, which is impressive. And now you would think that all of this burden on the economy would produce some effect on carbon, but what we see here is that the reduction in carbon emissions is perhaps going to be half as much as the Canada wildfires released this year. It's not much of an accomplishment. Meanwhile, General Motors and others will have to pay penalties and may, in fact, do so if they don't meet these standards. So it's just one of the things that the Biden crowd is trying to ram through, while most Americans are quite sensibly on vacation, not reading the Federal Register or scrutinizing what's going on.
And most reporters don't even read the Federal Register. Kim, give us a couple of other examples of what they're doing.
Well, so here's a big one, Paul. The National Environmental Policy Act, which is what deals with permitting standards. They've got a new rule out saying that in future, all of these project analyses are going to have to take into account climate change and environmental justice. So that means that as regulators are reviewing, this pipeline, they might have to say, well, would a solar panel make more sense? Maybe if so, we're not going to approve this pipeline. The other problem with this particular change, Paul, is that, NEPA was passed in order to mitigate local environmental problems. They are now widening that to say that analyses have to look at the global effects of climate change. And all of this is going to make infrastructure projects either impossible or more costly. And I would argue this is another one that's ripe for a Supreme Court challenge because they are rewriting the fundamental importance of this rule and also undermining the deal they made with Joe Manchin in the recent Inflation Reduction Act over speeding up some of these regulatory approvals.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing stuff, Dan, when you look at just time and again. If you look at the sum total over the first 2 years of the Biden presidency and now the third year, He's surpassing whatever Barack Obama did. I mean, it's an extraordinary number of new major and costly rules. You had another example or two?
Well, I mean, it's the politics of this can't be avoided. It's an amazing regulatory tsunami. And this explains a couple of things in our politics. One, why Democrats love Joe Biden. Because he's basically a passive president. With Biden, it's just fire and forget, just pour it on through there. And the progressives in the White House are just pushing one regulation. This is the Elizabeth Warren model of the presidency,
right?
Basically to reduce Congress to a nullity. The second aspect, this explains why the progressives are attacking the Supreme Court, or why they want to attack the Supreme Court. They need a Supreme Court that would rubber stamp all of these regulatory initiatives instead of the one that they have now, which is inclined to push back against things, as they did with Biden's student debt plan. So this really is where the progressives want to take the country. It reduces Congress to nothing, but I think as long as the Supreme Court is sitting there, we're going to have some of these regulatory initiatives become major policy questions that go before the Supreme Court.
Kate, on this question that Dan raised about Congress being a nullity, is that what can Congress do? I know it has the Review Act, which they can override certain regulations with votes in the House and the Senate, but you got to get the president to sign it. He's not going to sign that, so those will fail. But what other recourse is there for Congress, or do we have to end up going to court?
Yeah, well, Paul, those votes may well fail and not be able to be overridden, but I think they're still worth taking, because I think Democrats should have to go on the record about whether they support some of these rules or not. But barring that, I mean, the appropriations process is a powerful avenue for Republicans to consider as they try to withhold funding. I mean, Congress has the power of the purse. So that would be one avenue I would consider. I would add, too, this is a great theme for any Republican who's running for president right now. In addition to being a big drag on the economy and growth, like we were just discussing, I mean, this is not how the government is supposed to function. And so I think this is a good subject for Republicans to take up in getting that power back to Congress and out of the administrative state.
Yeah, Kim, the government likes to do this because they can make it very complicated. You write a 700-page rule, nobody's going to read. The citizens don't read. The press ignores it because they think it's boring. And yet this is how we govern ourselves these days. This is how government acts, and it leaves citizens really at the mercy of people who are unelected.
Yeah, it's outrageous. And by the way, this is partly the failure of what used to be a bipartisan coalition in Congress pushing back against this. And I think the administration is courting some big Supreme Court justices that really do rein in the bureaucratic state.